welcome to the lecture series on human resource management. So friends, in the previous lecture we learnt about performance appraisal as an important function of the human resource department. So what is performance appraisal? In performance appraisal we actually evaluate the performance of the employees so that we know where they are lacking, what skills they need to work upon, and what is their current level of performance. So as I emphasize that every individual or every employee in an organization won't be performing at the same level. The level of performance would be different from for various employees. So we need to understand as an organization that who is performing well and who is not performing up to the mark. Then we also learned that while designing a performance appraisal system, what characteristics we need to make so that the program or the design of the appraisal is effective. So the appraisal program should be understandable, it should be simple to implement, it should be done in a manner that the employees understand what is expected out of them. Then we also learnt about the process of the appraisal system, and we learnt what are the problems while we are rating an employee, and we discussed these at length. Now coming to the current aspects, we are now going to learn how to solve the rater's error. So we learned that somebody who is evaluating the employee might not perform himself or herself in the proper manner. He himself is not rating or assessing the employee properly. Now how to solve that problem? So in that aspect we can say that training can help improve the appraisal system to the extent of distortion that occurs due to raters' errors such as the halo effect, the leniency, the central tendency, and stereotypes, prejudices and biases that we learnt in the previous lecture. Then another way of solving the rater's error is to select the right rater. So it is not only the ratee that is important, even the one who is rating or the assessor is also important. So we need to select the right rater who does not succumb to external pressures. So we all know that in organization there can be a number of external or external pressures that the rater might be experiencing. So does he succumb to those pressures and rate the people or rate the employees all in a good manner? So that again needs to be taken care of. So what are the qualities of a good rater? Let's quickly understand how to be a good rater or how to be a good evaluator. So he is somebody who accurately describes the objective and context of what is being evaluated. Now that has to be very clear in the mind of the person who is being evaluated and also the one who is evaluating. So if you are a rater, you must be able to understand as to what needs to be evaluated, and the same must be communicated to the other person as well. Then secondly, he or she must be able to conceptualize the purpose and framework of evaluation. Now every evaluation must have a proper framework, and that articulation of that framework must be done in a proper manner. The next is that he should be able to derive useful evaluation questions, data requirements and appropriate data sources. So how we are evaluating, how we are assessing the employee is through certain questions. It can be a questionnaire, it can be an interview method, or it can be any other method that we are going to discuss today. But how you are evaluating those questions? Are you bringing bias? Are you bringing your own subjectivity, or are you bringing your own clouded perceptions while evaluating the other person? So if that is the case, the rating would not be precise. So to be a good rater, you must be able to evaluate the questions and the data that you are collecting. The next is that you must be able to select the means for collecting and analyzing the data. So, what means are you thinking of while you want to analyze or collect the data from the employees? So, that is also very important. Then most importantly, you must be able, or the rater must be able to effectively communicate the results and recommendations to the people or the employees. Now, this is very important that once you have conducted the evaluation process, it is very important that you communicate the results to the employees so that they can work upon their weaknesses, they are aware of their strengths. So, that is again a very important function of the human resource department, that whatever results you have achieved, you must communicate them or give the feedback to the employees. Then they should be able in managing the evaluation project and maintain ethical standards. So, whatever evaluation you are doing, it should be under ethical standards and must be fair and just. So, unfair means should not be adopted while you are evaluating the performances. Then you should be able to adjust to external factors influencing evaluation. So, I already stated that the pressure of union, pressure of other parties is also there when you have to give your report. So, you must be able to maintain a good balance between what is true and what pressure you are getting. So, you must be able to adjust to these factors that may impact evaluation. Now, moving further, the next question that comes in our mind when we are evaluating or rating is that what should be evaluated or what should be rated. So, this should be again very clear in the mind of both the evaluator as well as the one who is evaluating. So, one of the steps in designing an appraisal program is to determine the evaluation criteria as to what exactly is required to be evaluated. What is it, the skills, is it the knowledge, is it the behavior, what is being evaluated. So, obviously the criteria should be related to the job, and these are the 7 criteria that are generally used when we talk of evaluation. One can be the quality, the quantity, the timeliness, cost effectiveness, the need for supervision, interpersonal impact and community service. So, these are the 7 criteria that are generally used to evaluate the performance of an employee. Now, the next question that comes is how often should an employee be assessed? So, what should be the time period or what should be the time span of evaluation, appraisal or assessment? So, the general trend is to evaluate once in 3 months or 6 months or once in a year. So, this is the general time period that the evaluation may take place. So, frequent evaluation gives constant feedback to the ratee, thus enabling to improve the performance in case of deficiency. So, as such frequent evaluations should be done so that the feedback can be given to the ratee, because if you are say conducting an appraisal after 2 years, by the time the employee might not be performing up to the mark, that needs to be controlled, monitored and checked so that he or she can improve upon their current level of performance. So, frequent evaluations must be done, and at the same time not just the evaluation, they must be given feedback as to where they are lacking. Now comes the next aspect of performance appraisal, and this is the most crucial aspect of performance appraisal, that is what methods of appraisal do we have, what are the various methods of appraisal. So, you can clearly see in this slide that there are 2 types of methods. One is the future oriented methods and the second is the past oriented methods. So, we are going to learn all these aspects. So, I will just quickly name the ones like in the past oriented, it is the critical incident, bars is there, field review, then there are tests, then ACRS, essay method, rating scales, checklist, forced choice, forced distribution. So these are all past oriented methods. Then there are future oriented, in which there is management by objectives or the MBO, the assessment centers, the 360-degree appraisal, the psychological appraisals. So all these are future oriented methods. So I have tried to give most of these methods we will be discussing, along with what are their features, what can be their potential advantages, what could be their disadvantages. So there is no right or wrong method of appraisal. You need to just understand what is the need of the appraisal, what is the time span of appraisal, who you are appraising. So we are going to discuss all these methods, and at times it is not just the one method is being used, but at times organizations use a combination of these methods. So friends, let's start with the past oriented methods of performance appraisal, and in this category the first one is rating scales. So rating scales, you must have heard of this term earlier also. It is considered to be the simplest and most popular technique for appraising employee performance, and the typical rating scale system, it consists or involves several numerical scales, each representing a job related performance criterion such as dependability, initiative, output, attendance, attitude, cooperation, etc. Now the each scale ranges from excellent to poor. So there are various categories, like it could be poor, it could be good, it could be then very good, excellent, like that. And the rater checks the appropriate performance level on each criterion, then computes the employee's total numerical score. For example, how many excellents you have got, or how many poor you have got. So that is how the scale is rated, and the number of points scored may be linked to salary increases, whereby so many points equal a rise of some percentage. So here you are just rating an employee's performance, employee's behavior, employee's skill on a scale of poor to excellent, and then you check the marks that are given along, and based on that uh, you are aligning the salary hike and certain increments or benefits that an employee might be getting. Now what are the advantages of rating scale? Well, it is adaptable, relatively easy to use, and of low cost. It doesn't involve much of cost, and nearly every type of job can be evaluated with a rating scale, and large number of employees can be evaluated in a short span of time. And most importantly, the rater does not need any kind of training to use this scale. So it is easy to use, no official training is required by the trainee. Moving further, there are certain disadvantages as well. The rater's biases are likely to influence the evaluation, and biases are pronounced on subjective criteria such as cooperation, attitude, and initiative. Furthermore, the numerical scoring gives an illusion of precision that is really unfounded. So if I am marking somebody excellent, then it is that is the numerical score. So how many excellents does a person get doesn't mean that it is precise or it is true. So that is the disadvantage of this method. Moving further, the second method that we are going to talk of is the checklist. So a checklist is a list of statements on the traits of the employee, and his or her job is prepared in two columns. So here we prepare two columns. The first column is a yes column and the second column is a no column. And there are statements. The rater will just tick in the yes column if the answer to the statement is affirmative or positive, and he will tick in the no column if the answer to the statement or the question is in negative. So after ticking off against each item, the rater forwards this list to the HR department for actual assessment. So it is the HR department that will further assign certain points to each yes ticked. So for example, each yes gets 2 marks. So on the basis of that, the total score of the employee is calculated. Now depending on the number of yes, the total score is arrived at, and when the points are allotted to checklist, the technique becomes a weighted checklist. Now what are the advantages of checklist method? Well, it is economical again. Then there is an ease of administration, it can be easily implemented, easily used, and again the rater does not require any proper training to incorporate or implement this method. And then this is a standardized method where the statements are all made prior to the implementation. Then comes the disadvantages of this method. Well, it is susceptible to a rater's biases. The rater can be biased while ticking the yes or the no columns. Then use of personality criteria instead of performance criteria. The statements are more related to the personality of a person and less of related to the performance thing. Then there can be misinterpretation of checklist items and use of improper weights by HR department. Since the supervisor is checking or ticking the checklist, but the ultimate assessment is being done by the HR department. So here there can be lack of communication, or there can be some misinterpretation as far as the ultimate assessment of the employee is concerned. So moving further, the next method of appraisal is the forced choice method. Now here the rater is given a series of statements about an employee. These statements are arranged in blocks of 2 or more, and the rater indicates which statement is most or least descriptive of the employee. So the actual assessment here also is done by the HR department, and this approach is known as the forced choice method because the rater is forced to select the statements which are ready made. So again, this is a standardized kind of a questionnaire or a standardized list of statements, and the assessor has to have check the statements that are already given. So he or she cannot make statements as per the requirement, but these statements are already there and they are ready made. Now the advantage here is that there is absence of personal bias in rating, because as already stated, the statements are ready made and they are made prior to the assessment. But the disadvantage is that the statements may not be properly framed. They may not be precisely descriptive of the ratee's traits. So there could be certain traits that an employee is possessing, but those statements are not there in the questionnaire. So that can be a disadvantage of this method. Next comes the forced distribution method. So the forced distribution method, it operates under an assumption that employee performance level conforms to a normal statistical distribution. So we all know that a normal statistical distribution is exhibited by a bell-shaped curve, and generally it is assumed that employee performance levels conform to a bell-shaped curve. So this is the assumption of this method. So here you can see this is the forced distribution on a bell-shaped curve. So here you can clearly see that this is a bell-shaped curve which shows the performance levels of employees, and you can clearly see that only 10% people are excellent and 10% again are unsatisfactory. If you see the level of performances that are good, you will see that it is 20%, and 40% score is given to average performers. That means 40% of the employees are performing average. So this is the forced distribution and the assumption that the performances match a bell-shaped curve. So it is clear from this this description itself, that what would be the disadvantages? Well, first of all, in organizations that have done a good job of selecting and retaining only good performers. So, here I can emphasize that in such organizations that have selected and retained good performance, but due to forced distribution approach, we are putting them in the category of average or below good performance levels. So, there is again an error of central tendency that we had discussed in the previous lecture, when we talked of the errors that we commit, the mistakes that we commit while rating individuals, and that is putting people in the average category or just the satisfactory category. So, another disadvantage is that it is difficult for the rater to explain to the ratee why he or she has been placed in a particular group. So, since it is an assumption that only 40% of the people would be the one who have average and only 10% are the ones who are excellent. So, it becomes difficult for the rater to explain as to why he or she is placed in a particular group. Then the advantage, however, of this method is that it eliminates the error of leniency. So, error of leniency means that you are giving good performance or good or excellent category to all the employees or all the individuals in the organization. That is the error of leniency. Now, coming to the next method, it is the behaviorally anchored rating scales, or the BARS method. So, these are rating scales whose scale points are determined by statements of effective and ineffective behavior. So, here we are dividing an individual's behaviors into effective behaviors as well as ineffective behaviors, and they are said to be behaviorally anchored, in that the scales represent a range of descriptive statements of behavior varying from least to most effective. Now, what are the features of BARS? Well, here the areas of performance to be evaluated are identified and defined by the raters. The scales are anchored by descriptions of actual job behavior that supervisors agree. These represent the specific levels of performance, and the result again is a set of rating scales in which both dimensions and anchors are precisely defined. So, these were some of the features of the BARS method. Now, moving further, the next method is the field review method of appraisal. Now, this is an appraisal by someone outside the ratee's own department. It could be someone from the corporate office or the HR department. So, we had learnt about that who is going to assess an individual, and we learned that it could be your immediate boss, it could be your subordinate, it could be a peer, or it could be anybody out from your department. So, this is that kind of a review called the field review method, where someone from the other departments or the HR department would be assessing or evaluating you. The outsider reviews employee records and holds interviews with the ratee and his or her superior. So, primarily it is used for making promotional decisions at managerial level, and it is also useful when we have to compare certain information that is needed from employees in different units or locations. So, moving further, the next method of appraisal is the confidential records. So, it is maintained mostly in government departments, though used in industry also. So, a typical annual confidential report, or the ACR, can have 14 items. These can be attendance, it can be self-expression, which is written or oral. Then there can be ability to work with others, how do you score on this, what are your leadership skills, are you taking initiative in your department, what are your technical abilities, the knowledge that you have pertaining to the job that you are doing, what is the ability to understand new materials or processes, what is the ability to reason, the originality and resourcefulness, what are the areas of work that suit you as a person, what is your judgment level, your integrity, responsibility, and the indebtedness and memo served. So friends, in today's lecture, we have started to learn about various methods of performance appraisal. So as I stated that there are, broadly speaking, there are two categories. One is the past oriented methods and the second one is the future oriented methods. So we have started to learn about certain methods of the past oriented methods of performance appraisal, and we learnt certain methods also along with their features, their advantages and their disadvantages. So we shall be continuing with the same methods of performance appraisal in the next lecture also. Thank you.